Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Return to the Realm, a rereaders podcast for the Realm of the Elderlings series by Rob and Hobb. I'm Kayiu, joined by Alex and Leah, and we're on our second episode of Ship of Destiny. And even though you guys won't get to see it, we're now back on schedule to mostly live uploads. So yeah, uh, so today we're going to be covering chapters 5 through 9 of Ship of Destiny. And standard disclaimer, this is a rereaders podcast, so this will cover spoilers for all 16 books in the Realm of the Elderling series, not just this trilogy, and not just up to this point. So if you haven't read all of the books, this is your cue to tap out. Otherwise, we're glad to have you. Hey, we were actually just talking about this. If you haven't read all of the books, feel free to check out our not so live shows or live shows, which are spoiler free for past that point in the series. Getting into it, the first chapter we have here is chapter 5, Paragon and Piracy. We're back on board Paragon, who it's sort of like almost like they're hitting the Bermuda Triangle in terms of like, oh man, stuff is getting serious now. They're heading towards pirate-infested waters. There's tension on the ship because of like drills. Paragon is in a weirdly prophetic mood. We get most of the chapter from like Altia's perspective, and then she is conflicted for a variety of reasons, but there's like this, it's like, I don't know how to feel about Brashen, I don't know how to feel about what's going to happen when we get to Vivacia. Like, lots of building tension in the way that Hobb loves to do in third books and series. Yeah.
To be honest, it's been a very long time since I read this, so I'm having trouble remembering exactly. This is like the chapter where Amber and Lavoy are like butting heads, and Althea doesn't want to leave them on the deck together, right?
Yeah, I think that this chapter ends with that, because the next chapter we see on Paragon, like Amber's like knocked the fuck out on the deck, and Althea's like, what happened?
Yes. Yeah, because I figured because both Alex and I have a note that's just fuck Lavoy and basically nothing else.
Yeah. Because he's the worst. And he just gets worse.
He's awful.
I hate him.
And I have this in my note for the last chapter, but like their whole thing about like, oh, we can't do anything about Lavoy being a piece of shit because we're on a boat. I'm like, rules are made up. All rules are made up. You can actually do whatever you want. Like, it's so annoying. I'm like, this situation's way worse by you guys not doing anything because you're like, we can't. We're on a boat. We have to follow the boat rules.
I can see it from their points of view, but at the same time, like, he is getting so much more dangerous as they let him slide with so many more things. Like, they need to act now or throw him overboard.
Yeah, I was thinking about Lavoy, and I was like, obviously really infuriating and annoying, but like thinking about on the context of what's happening, it made me think about how like I feel like Lavoy is almost like parallel to Brashen in the sense of like he's everything that Brashen could have been if he wasn't a better person, basically, right? Because he's a person with a checkered past who's trying to who has ambition and is trying to go for a leadership role. Sort of at the start seems to have is gruff, but seems to have good intentions in terms of like bettering himself. But once he actually has a taste of power, he completely abuses it, unlike Brashen. In fact, I almost feel like Brashen's thing is the opposite in this section, right? Like he's really good as a captain, but in this section we see that he sort of feels trapped by the role, and he hasn't been a leader long enough to know that like when you're the leader, like you said, like you make the rules, so you can just be like, yeah, screw you. I'm not like I'm the captain, so sucks to suck.
Yep.
Instead of I'm the captain, oh, it sucks to be me. Woe is me. I have to hide my feelings all the time, and it's like, no, not really.
I feel like that's just Brashen's excuse so that he doesn't have to like admit his feelings to Althea and get rejected, because I feel like that's what he's afraid of.
Yes.
A little bit, but I also think he, like, from the way he describes it in the last chapter in the section, he genuinely has like this vision of captain being someone who is like stoic. And because he thinks about Althea, but he also thinks about, I want to go talk to Paragon, I want to go talk to Amber, and he says, I can't do any of these things. So it's not just, it was just him being like, oh, I don't know if about Althea. Then I could see that, but I think that like that's part of it. But I think he genuinely feels trapped by captaincy.
Where do you think he learned this? He didn't like. I don't think Ephron was that much detached from like his crew.
I feel like Ephron's the opposite.
Decided like Ephron's
like not life of the party, but he was like he really seemed like a straight shooter.
Right.
I feel like he knew all of his crew on a personal level. And that's part of the reason why they like respected him so much, because he was like such a genuine, like down to earth captain. And I don't know why Brashen isn't trying to do that a little bit more, but maybe it's because like he has worked on these really shitty ships before and knows how dangerous it can be if like the crew doesn't respect the captain or doesn't like listen to the captain, and he's more scared of that because he's got like a hodgepodge crew rather than like a curated crew that Ephron had.
Yeah, that was my thought as well. That's just sort of like I have to be like a point of respect and a point of stability, because otherwise things will fall apart. But also like stability isn't doing nothing. Stability is righting yourself if you start to like list over to one side. Speaking of Brashen, while we're on Brashen and Althea, while we're on the topic, there's like a long section here where like Jack is like talking about Brashen, and Althea is like, "Don't talk about him that way, not my man." It's so fun. I love Jack. I'm so sad we only get like little bits of her, but I was rereading the part in Tawny Man where she just like shows up unannounced. I love the descriptions of her because she fits like she's sort of like an amused cat who's just sort of like lazily teasing him, and then when Lord Golden comes in, he's like, Lord Golden like closed the door like he was afraid that Jack was like a puppy who would rush out into the corridor, and I love all these descriptions of her, but she's also just like this buff motherfucker who doesn't take shit. It's great.
I like it when she scolds Fitz for not like realizing that the fool is like in love with him, basically. She's like, you're stupid and you're lucky that you're handsome, or she says something along those lines.
Basically, yes.
Yeah.
He's like, man, if it was raining soup, you'd be out there with a fork. And that shit stuck with me.
Poor Fitz. He would.
Speaking of Fitz, there's one part where Althea is like musing on Paragon. And she says, it could not be good for a man or a live ship to ponder endlessly on the nature of himself. And I'm like, that's literally what Fitz does his whole life. He's just pondering endlessly on the nature of himself.
Yeah.
And then Paragon gets Fitz's face. They're the same.
Yeah, and really appropriate.
Yeah.
One of the quotes I had from Paragon makes him sound like Night Eyes, because he's talking to Althea, and Althea's like stressed about how like the drills aren't going to work when it comes to real combat and all that stuff. And then like, what are they going to do when they get to Kennet? And Paragon was like, long or short, if you worry about every step of a journey, you will divide it endlessly into pieces, any of which may defeat you. And I'm like, that sounds very much like something Night Eyes would say.
Yeah, it sounds like him talking about like, wasn't there a line where he says something about instead of just eating the rabbit, you like cut it up into tiny pieces?
Yeah.
That's what that reminds me of.
Yeah, because I think that's how, like, I think he was talking about time in there, but like The journey is the same thing. Like, you're worrying about stuff that's in the future that has not happened and may not happen anyways. So maybe just try and calm it down.
It reminded me of Night Eyes talking about like the stone game. Like he's always like you're thinking about like one move ahead. Think about the big picture, the strategy.
Mm-hmm.
I think one thing that I really like about this chapter is sort of lots of it is centering on this discussion between Brash and Amber and Althea about like their ability or capacity to fight. I like that because I feel like in most fantasy series by this point in the series, there'd be an assumption of competency, right? Like they're just sort of be like, yeah, they know how to fight. Like it's the last book of the trilogy. They're going to have to fight, therefore they know how to fight. But like taking the time for Brashen to be like, we don't know shit. We're not like we haven't lived a life of hardship. Is like, I like it. I feel like Hobb has like a good sense of like how to introduce conflict or complications without it feeling contrived. If that makes sense. I really like that about this chapter. Yeah.
I do like later on how when the pirates are boarding Paragon, it just turns into a brawl because that's how everyone knows how to fight. So instead of having it be like them using their swords competently and stuff, it's just them like throwing hands around because that's what they're used to and comfortable with.
Lop like whacking everyone with the giant like pole or whatever. Yeah.
Yes, and almost killing Amber.
And actually, I remember like there's a line where it's like, yeah, Lop doesn't mess around with that pole, and like he just like kills someone. He like brains someone.
It was the guy that Althea told him to like subdue. He whacked him so hard that I think he had like a seizure and just died on the ship. Like, geez.
Yeah. He's like that character from Of Mice and Men, Lenny, that like doesn't know his own strength and just accidentally kills stuff.
Mm-hmm. No wonder Lavoie doesn't trust him with a sharp object. Jesus.
Yeah.
Kind of wish Lop talked to Paragon, because I didn't, until you mentioned Lenny, I didn't really like think about the comparison. But like Paragon is also sort of like this like figure trapped in a body who like is only sometimes aware of the limits of his own strength. Like sometimes he's really aware of it and he's like, I could crush y'all. But sometimes he's like, he just like genuinely does not know what he's capable of. So basically, I mean, anyone other than Lavoie would have been nice, but I think that other than our main characters, I think Lop would be a cool person for Paragon to interact with.
Yeah.
I think my other notes are sort of just like little details here and there. When they're talking about like pretending to be pirates, Brashen is thinking about like what flag or emblem they could have, and he says something about like a serpent or like a lunging serpent, and he says it's a scariest emblem I could think of, straight from my worst nightmares. And usually when like when characters talk about like worst nightmares or like those kind of phrases, right? It's just like metaphorical. But we know from the first book that that's actually like a nightmare that Brashen has, because there was a time that he was on when he was younger on that ship, and the serpent was coming for him. So I thought that was neat. I feel like
I totally forgot about that.
I feel like Hobb does a really good job of like making things that could be throwaway phrases into like actual callbacks.
Definitely. That's why we
There's
have
nothing wrong with them being throwaway phrases, but like it's nice that she takes the effort.
I was thinking about this and I was wondering how much of Hobb's writing with the very subtle things is intentional and how much of it just happened naturally and like intuitively. Because I feel like it must be so exhausting if you have to remember and keep track of all of this stuff to like tie it back in such small ways, or if she just kind of like writes, and then it just, like, the characters are already kind of fully formed inside her, and she doesn't have to do much.
I think she puts a bit of effort into it, because recently she tweeted that she made a chronological error in something she wrote, and she was like, I have to tear the whole thing apart and then reconstruct it. And she was like, but I think I'm just going to watch TV instead or something.
I mean, that sounds like a good trade-off.
Yeah. I'm going to see if I can find it. I was like, oh, not everybody or other people make those mistakes too.
I feel like it's nice having an author who's like upfront with stuff like that, because it makes you feel like your first draft and all that stuff doesn't have to be perfect, because if they are making errors in their writing, then it's okay for like the little people to make errors in theirs too.
Right.
Yeah, I remember reading something from like Preordain recently about that, and I was like talking about like the stuff that he's learned over the course of like writing Percy Jackson in the series and like stuff he would do differently, and I'm like, that's neat. I love those books, but it's like neat to like have that kind of reflection. Also, wait, how recent was this Hobb tweet?
It was like I saw it recently, but now I'm trying to find it and I can't find it.
Because I was thinking, I didn't know I didn't know that she was writing something like, because I thought she was like thinking like she was like working on something and then she stopped working on it over like the pandemic or something. But like if she's writing actively now, I'm excited.
I believe she is.
I thought that she was like more writing as Megan Lindholm than Robin Hobb, because I knew that she had like Robin Hobb stuff on the back burner, but I didn't think that she was like focusing on it right now.
It didn't say anything about like what the project is.
But if it's just chronological, you kind of have to hope that it's like for us, right?
Yeah, it said I have made a chronological error, and that's all it said. Yeah, I can't find it now, so I wonder if she like deleted it.
Too much speculation underneath.
Yeah.
I feel like honestly, if Robin Hobb doesn't write a single word more and like publish anything else in the realm of the Elderlings, like I will be satisfied, because it is perfect and like finished.
And there's a lot of content.
Yeah, like, it's like finished in my eyes, so it doesn't have like. I feel like anything else would be like
icing on the cake.
Side things. Yeah, it's not like the full thing, because Realm of the Elderlings is Fitz's story. Like I feel like it's Fitz.
I know that some people want a B story, and I think I've said this before, but like I don't want her to write a B story because I'm afraid what she'll do to B.
B's been through enough as it is. Can we just get like a patience chivalry romance? Because that's what I want.
Yeah, I want a patience chivalry romance. I want something where the satrap dies.
I want patience chivalry Burrich love triangle romance, but they become a throuple instead of it being a love triangle, because definitely Burrich is in love with chivalry.
We're back on this. We need to write our own fanfiction.
I will die on this hill. Burrich loves
the first time in like 10 years I'm actually doing like actual writing in its fan fiction, so I may, after I'm done with that project, I may try to do like a Realm of the Elderlings thing for realsies.
I hope that you let us read it.
I definitely will. Yeah, I think it's interesting because like so many times at the end of Hobb trilogies, I felt like dissatisfied or like I want more. But she really came out with the final series, and I was like, okay, yeah, you know, that makes sense. Like, because it never really felt like an ending to Fitz's story until then.
Because Fitz was still alive.
Okay, well, not just that, but at the end of the first trilogy, I'm like, what the fuck? He's depressed and living in the woods. You can't do this to my boy. And then at the end of the second trilogy, I'm like, I know you didn't just like, okay, Molly's nice and all, but I know you didn't really just be like, the dead, I'll see you like never, and instead I'm getting back with Molly. Like, I know you did not just do that, Hobb.
Yeah.
And I honestly, wish the last trilogy hadn't happened because it's like so much hurt for them, but also it makes sense as an ending. Yeah.
Yeah, the last trilogy's like hard to read because what happens to the fool is so horrible.
Oh my god, I
And
know.
what happens to B is so horrible. And Fitz honestly sometimes frustrates me because, like, Farseer trilogy Fitz would. There's no way that the people that stole B would have been able to leave the Six Duchies. He'd have been on their asses. And in the last trilogy, he's just like, I'll go to Buckkeep and practice doing sword stuff. And then I'll chase after B. And it annoys me. Like, I know they explain it and he has reasons that are logical, but I'm used to the Fitz that just runs off half-cocked and gets shit done.
Well, Fitz hasn't been an assassin or a teenager in like decades. So it makes sense that he would be so rusty and like stressed. And I feel like it's easy to go out and just like go gung ho about something when you really don't have too many people relying on you. And when it's like you're doing it for someone who's not so close to you, when it's like your own kid, I feel like it's very different. And like Fitz probably can't even think correctly to try and find B.
It reminds me of like in like the last book of the Tawny Man trilogy, when Fitz is like just gets ejected from the Pale Woman's place, and he's like, "We need to kill the dragon now. We need to kill the dragon now. Burrich, I know you're here, but we need to kill the dragon so we can save the fool. Otherwise, she's gonna kill the fool." And like, yeah, Fitz gets stir crazy with these kind of things. So I guess the last trilogy is a little. He's grown up, he's matured, but also it's nice to see him be insane over the people he loves. Anyways, okay, we've gotten our mandatory talking about another series out of the way.
For this
chapter.
Out
of the way. Yeah, for this chapter.
Yeah.
Bringing it back to the Fool and Amber, I think that Amber should worry less now about whether or not she made the right decision going with Althea and Brashen on the ship instead of like staying in Bingtown or like looking for Wintro, because she's going through one of her like changes as a white prophet. So that should have been enough kind of like sign that Amber's on the right path, right?
I would think
she learns about that until she talks to Prilkop, right? She doesn't like learn about the significance of changes. From what I remember, she's just like, yeah, this is just a thing that my species does. And Prilkop is like, yeah, actually, it's a thing that our species does, but like, it happens as we fulfill our purpose more and more.
Well, I hope that Amber worries a little bit less, even if she doesn't know what the hell is going on with herself.
Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes Amber, it's for someone who's very much like, I'll go where the flow of fate takes me. Amber, more so than the Fool, worries a lot about things happening the right way. I think she's
yeah.
It almost wonder if she's like. Honestly, think that like what happened to Fitz is probably like weighing on her, and she's sort of like seated, but like I want to do it right this time, and so she's like she like takes a more active role, and that ironically ends up like zigzag past what she needs to do. Talking about Amber, there's a line where Althea is talking about her, and she's like, with a sinking heart, Althea wished that Amber were not so proud. She would just lower her head a bit to the first mate, Lavoy would be content. It's sort of like, no, he really wouldn't. And I think that I think this is sort of the thing that like Althea and Brashen and everyone who are Bingtown sailors don't get, is that it's coming back to what we were talking about at the start of the chapter with the idea of like rules and stuff. Like are made up, and the people who realize that they're made up will just simply not care about them. So like Lavoy, if you like try to like play within like cities and in diplomacy, he'll just take what he can. It's all bullies will do that, right? Like they'll give them an inch and they'll take a mile. I also think it's sort of like Althea is always so like. There's another time where she's like, it wasn't fair. Jack had grown up in the Six Duchies and claimed this equality as her birthright. Althea sometimes felt she needed someone's permission to simply be herself. It's sort of like, right, and it's difficult, but like you gotta stand up for yourself and like have that, like, and you gotta have that like it's like I feel like Althea is like she'll like learn that as the story goes on, but she like needs to like learn from Jack and Amber and all of those people to like be proud of yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, and as much
she also doesn't feel confident yet, but yeah.
Well, and as much as she like resents and complains about the way that like Bingtown society treat women, she projects that onto herself even. Because she's like, well, I couldn't be that way because I was born a woman in Bingtown. It's like, you absolutely could just act the same way as Jack. The only thing that's preventing you from doing that is yourself.
Especially here where it's like, who is the representative of Bingtown who is going to judge you other than yourself? Literally no one.
Right.
Brashen doesn't care. The people who are hired from Bingtown care. They hate Bingtown society probably because they're like society or whatever. So like, a chance to reinvent yourself. Like, Brashen's taking it, Paragon's taking it, everyone's taking it except you. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm not blaming her completely for it, right? Like, there's so much shit that's been like put on her, but like, yeah. On that note, I think that's a great point to end on in moving to the next chapter titled "An Independent Woman." Chapter 6, An Independent Woman. We follow. There's like sort of dual point of view between Serilla and Ronica. Serilla is not getting much better. She's sort of like spiraling into, I really want to control Bingtown. I feel like cheated of it. And Ronica tries to give her like a wake up call, as in like, you need to change your perspective on things. Especially as to like what you were owed and how you let trauma and stuff shape you. And some of it, Veronica's not really being fair. Some of it, Veronica's giving her a reality check. But the scene, like after that confrontation, the scene moves on to like there's like a traders meeting, at which Serilla sort of like tries to seize power, but things don't go as planned, and the Bingtown traders come together and start to work as a unit again. Great for Bingtown, not a great victory for Serilla. And so she's sort of doubling down on her grasp for power. Yeah.
I am so frustrated with Serilla, just like in general, because she makes all of the wrong decisions, she makes all of the wrong allegiances, and if she would have just listened to Ronica and like what she perceives as Ronica's like nagging, she would have become a good leader. And she could have become even a great leader at that point if she had just taken Ronica's advice. But instead, she views Ronica as like a threat to her power. And I wonder if that's because like Ronica's a woman and she's so confident like in like her place in society and in like Bingtown as a trader, if that like makes her a threat, and that's why she can't like anything Ronica says, Serilla has to just ignore it.
Yeah.
She sort of mentions that like semi-explicitly at one or 2 points. Yeah.
I think also Serilla is just trying to figure out like who she can manipulate to be on her side and who she can't. And Ronica is just someone that she can't manipulate. And if she can't, they're immediately an enemy. And she won't even, like, consider them to be anything else. But I do wonder if she was, like, in her right mind, if the things Ronica's saying and the, like, questions Ronica asks would make sense to her. or if it's just because she's like she's kind of like losing it, if that's why she's so resistant. Because Ronica like is making a lot of good points and is being very logical, and Serilla just is not capable of like thinking a rational thought at this moment.
She's in fight or flight mode and she just can't engage with it.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Because if she was in her right mind and wasn't thinking of like how to be the satrap, she, I think, would have teamed up with Ronica and they would have been an incredible team. And it's just like disappointing that she can't see that. Because even Ronica says like she would love to be able to like approach Serilla as like an ally, and like she doesn't have that chance because like Serilla makes it all about like competition, and if Ronica has power, then it's taking away from Serilla's instead of like them combining it and like sharing it together.
Mm-hmm. I also think saying that Serilla wants to be the satrap is like a really good call, and it's something I think Serilla herself would hate, obviously, as like a comparison. But I wrote like a similar thing at like the start of the chapter where Serilla's like she's walking through like the destroyed thing of Bingtown, right? And she's like, her thing isn't like empathy for the people. She's like, I was cheated of a place I was promised by this destruction, and she calls like Bingtown a bauble. Like that is such a like satrap way of looking at it.
Yeah. Well, and even the way that she's daydreaming about what would happen when she's like taking the carriage ride, she's like, oh, I would like get out and praise them for being so hardworking and like pulling themselves up by their bootstraps, and they would invite me in and we would have tea and then they would love me. And like she's not thinking at all about the people. And when Ronica, like you see such a stark difference when like Ronica is going through there and seeing like how much destruction there was and how like the people aren't working together, and that they could get so much more done if they had worked together and like viewed each other as neighbors instead of as threats to like their own property.
Right. This chapter made me like, it put in perspective for me how much Ronica has grown as a character. There's a part where she says, if we focus on trying to go back to what Bingtown was, we're doomed to defeat. We must go forward to create a new Bingtown. And first book Ronica would never have said that. She was so obsessed with appearances and with keeping up tradition and never changing anything. Like, she'd be like, but that's always the way we've done it. Like, she would not think outside of that box at all. Which is why she wouldn't give the ship to Althea. Like, that's the whole reason. So that line really struck me because, like, she actually ruins all of their lives because she's so stuck on tradition and refuses to, like, consider anything new. And then here she's like, we have to build a new Bingtown. We can't go back to what we were before because it didn't work.
And the wildest thing is she's thinking about, like, uniting with even the new traders too, like not just the Three Ships people, but also like integrating the new traders as long as they're willing to like abide by Bingtown's laws of like no slavery and stuff. She would like welcome them in, and I feel like that's not at all something she would have done in the past,
right?
Because of like the charters and like the land being owed to the people who like suffered the most,
right?
Another thing about like Ronica changing is that I think it's really hilarious how like blunt she is, because she used to care so much about propriety and like talking with Serilla and everyone. She's just like, and I think honestly I think it's a little bit extreme, especially when talking with Serilla. Like I think the way how blunt she is could like gotten her killed in a few situations, but honestly, I kind of don't mind because it's so nice to see like Ronica actually speaking her mind and not being like, oh, what will people think of us if we say this? It's like, who fucking cares?
Right.
She's acting like Malta now.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
I love it. Especially the way that Malta acts with the satrap. Like, it seems like all the people from Jamilia get treated the same way by all the different best right women.
Mm-hmm.
following the train of thought, it's really funny because I feel like in Tawny Man, it's the opposite, where it's Jack who is sort of like talking to Fitz that way, like, open your eyes, dude, like, come on. And Fitz is like, maybe you've just spent too long in Jamila, like, free love or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Going back to Ronica, she has grown and changed and evolved so much, but I am so frustrated that she is still, like, making excuses for Devad and, like, acting like he's not a traitor, even after his death, and, like, how much he was affiliated with the slave trade. Like, I don't know why she's still so dead set on, like, I have to, like, avenge him and like clear his name.
I agree. That's actually one of my notes for, I think, this chapter is, I was like, I don't understand why the fuck she's so hung up on Devad's death. Like, in the grand scheme of what's going on in Bingtown right now, there are a lot more important things to do, like banding together and rebuilding the town and figuring out what you're going to do about, like, the Chalcidian war galleys in the bay. And she's just like, we need the council to spend time talking about Devad's death. Like, it's, I don't know. I just think it's like, not important when they're trying to, like, figure out their future and restore their town, and a shit ton of other people died.
Well, I understand her wanting to, like, because she's like reliving the past and like living in nostalgia because that's all she has right now. But that's no, like, she had so many other points that she could have brought up in, like, uniting Bingtown at the, like, traders meeting, and instead she brought up Devad. Like, why don't we focus on
to Althea, honestly, when Althea's like, we need to go save my family's life ship, and it's like, why did you have to choose the point that's closest to and most personal to you? That's not the great strategy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm on one hand, okay, I think Monica's attachment to Devad is understandable, but also really stupid, and also, like, Raish is right there. Like, are you still like? It's. I get that he's a longtime friend, but, like, you've had time to process and let go. On the other hand, though, I kind of get what the point is politically, right? Because the idea is, like, Serilla and her group have branded Devad as, like, the sole, as, like, a traitor and, like, a go-between or whatever. But I think the idea is, if, like, they find out that he wasn't a traitor or collaborator or whatever, it sort of reveals that maybe Cerilla's claim to speak on the authority of the satrap is not there. There's, like, and that it gives, like, Bingtown less reason to sort of trust Cerilla's coalition, I think, is the idea. Again, I think it's an entirely vested approach to it, where it's like, I'm going to take the thing that matters most to me and use that as the focal point for everything.
It also, like, there is one point she makes that there, by calling him a traitor when everyone knows that the Vestrits are friends with him, that's, like, casting doubt and therefore putting danger on being a Vestrit. So there is an element of, like, we need to clear our own names, and by clearing his name, that will clear our names. But I don't know, it just seems silly for her to be so aggressive about it when there's very much bigger problems. But you're totally right in that that's a very Vestrit approach.
I think also there's a problem with her thinking that clearing Devad's name is going to clear the Vestrite name, because, like, her family ship was also a slaver. So in everyone's eyes, she's already associated with the new traders, regardless of if it's through Devad or through her own self. Like, she thinks at she is, like, saying at the end in her head, she's like, it might not be of her own doing, but her own family ship had gone as a slaver. But it's only her doing that the ship is a slaver. If she wasn't the one who gave the ship to Kyle, it would have never become a slaver. If she would have just let Althea inherit the ship like she was meant to, none of this would have happened. And she would be fine.
Yep.
It pissed me off that she's like shirking the responsibility. Like, it's your fault.
Like, yeah, and like, I would have been annoyed if she said like it's partially my responsibility, but like I would get it, right? Like I could see how she's like, well, Kyle did it, and maybe my daughter should have been more there, even if it's wrong, right? I could get it, but her being like, well, I washed my hands of it is sort of like, come the fuck on, dog. Like, come on.
Right.
Yeah, I didn't do anything but like Vivacia's a slaver, so I guess that. But like, you're wrong.
Right.
You're wrong and you're stupid in this point. I like how she's changing, but she's dumb.
Alex just like we're talking about how Ronka's changing, and Alex just like burning up. They're like, can't let go of this though.
Look, I like that she's changing, but she needs to reconcile the fact that she made some grave errors in the past and needs to fix that, or at least admit to herself that it's her freaking fault.
See, I kind of wish, like, Raish is like nice to Ronica. I kind of wish Raish was a little bit like, Raish is kind of a hard ass at times, but I wish Raish was more of a hard ass towards Ronica. Like, give her some tough love.
Yeah, I think she should be more like straight up with Ronica, because she knows all that happened, I think, unless Ronica just kept it a secret from her. But I feel like that's kind of a hard thing to keep a secret from, is like the fact that your family live ship became a slaver. And like, Rach does have a moment of putting Ronica in her place, and Ronica does like admit it, and she becomes like ashamed and stuff when she doesn't think of the like tattooed people or like the slaves, as she thinks of them, as like a group that could help unite Bingtown. And Rach is like, you're forgetting a whole group of people. And then Ronica realizes, oh fuck, like, I screwed up. I'm not even thinking of them as people or something. But I feel like Rach should have more moments of that, where Ronica has to face everything that she and her family has done.
Speaking of the Vestrits and having weird ass opinions about slaves, this is a line I forgot from the last chapter, but Althea, I think she's talking to Paragon, and she's like, sometimes it seems to me there's not much difference between being a sailor and being a slave. And I'm like, say what now? Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was quite tone deaf.
Talking about Raish, my favorite part of this chapter, Raish is like talking about Amber and uniting the slaves, and is basically like describing Amber and saying, Mom said she had been a slave herself once, despite the fact that she has no tattoos. She wears a freedom ring in one ear, the earring that Chalcedian freed slaves must purchase and wear to prove that they have been granted their freedom. I asked her once if she had bought her freedom, or if it would belong to her mother. She was quiet for a time, and then said it had been a gift from her one true love. Ah! Ah!
I know, I love that.
Yep.
It's like, and honestly, I'm kind of surprised that like our first time readers didn't catch that. But I guess.
Do they know
I guess
for
you don't
sure
think
that
about
it's
it,
a
right?
freedom ring that Burrich has that he gives to Fitz? Okay.
Burrich
Because Fitz tells him the history of it, like he got it from his grandma or something. Yeah.
Oh, right. Sometimes I forget, like what book we find information out in.
Yeah, I think another thing from that passage that should have definitely tipped them off, if not like almost spoiled it, is the fact that like Amber straight up says, I'm a prophet, I've been sent to save the world. Like, just flat out.
They have put together the fact that I think they think Amber is another prophet like the Fool.
They don't realize that they are the same.
They don't realize it's the same person.
I wonder if they ever will until it's revealed to them.
Jared was getting close at one point, and Julia put a heart stop
Shut
on
him
it.
down.
Yeah.
No, you're wrong. I have to hide myself half the time when they're talking about the Fool and Amber because I will spoil it for sure just with my facial expressions.
Yes.
I think I'm glad that in the last live show we got all of that out with the Paragon thing, because when Amber and the Fool came up, we were able to keep a straight face at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I feel like this should really be the tipping point, but maybe when Paragon gets Fitz's face, that'll be the thing, because earring is a detail, but I think it's a detail we latch onto because we know how important it is to them, and to them it's just might have forgotten it by now.
Yeah. There's one more thing from that section that I clung on to. It's Rach was talking about Amber still, and she said some said she had been a slave herself once despite the fact that she has no tattoos. But she has the biggest tattoo of all of them. They just don't know it or see it. And I feel like that could be her slave tattoo because Clarice was not a good place to her.
Yeah. That's a good point.
The explicit intention of the tattoo is to brand her as different and wrong and to control her because it has the same burning thing. So honestly, given all the shitty slave comparisons we've seen all characters make throughout this book, I think that's the first winning one we have because it's actually on point. Yeah. I have two last notes, and one of them is something I probably should have just said at the start, but it's I forgot how over the top Serilla is because she still gets to be the Bingtown ambassador in Tawny Man. So, right. That's just crazy to me that after all of this, they still let her be the main contact point with the 6 duchies.
Well, she kind of figures her head out, right?
I think. But also, isn't that not a great position anyways? Because they think of the 6 duchies as this barbaric land. So they're probably just sending her off on something that she thinks is this big mission. And they're yeah, it's really important. Don't screw this up. And then they're behind their backs, oh yeah, she's gonna realize they don't even have windows and shit. They're this backwards country.
They give her elderling gifts to give to the kingdom. I think, and then they're yeah, we need to bring dragons back to the world, so we've come to talk to you about dragons.
And what's his face is there too, Selden.
Selden.
Well, they brought Selden because Selden's the reliable one. I'm sure that Serilla gets her head. They do they elect stuff. They elect people after. So I think that she integrated herself. But I'm annoyed with her right now, so I can't.
Right. She figures her head out.
I think that she does that in this book. I think we see some of her coming back to logic.
Yeah.
At the end. And
what's the name
admitting
of the asshole trader? Road Cairn. Yeah, Road Cairn.
Oh, yeah.
I think I think there's a scene where she finally breaks ties with him and asserts herself. That's the moment.
Yeah.
I was gonna say something, but I can't remember now.
Sorry.
I don't know. It's gone. Well, speaking of her, there is one more line that pissed me off that she said. She's she represented the government of Bingtown. I'm girl, you don't represent anything right now. You are not the government of Bingtown. Are you actually kidding me?
She is
what government?
Hate her at this point. And I know that I shouldn't because she's been through a lot, but she's so fucking frustrating. I can't right now.
There's a line that Veronica says that perfectly encapsulates this. Still, it was difficult to pity anyone so obsessed with obtaining and holding power for themselves.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's it. That's the tweet. That's Serilla's character.
Yeah. I'm glad that she like gets her head though, and becomes a real person in society. But geez, can we speed it up a little bit, please?
Yeah, like
She's
the parts that are of her point of view are like hard to read because it's like it's almost like the 1.5 pages that we get of like Regal's point of view where it's just completely unhinged. But with
Yeah.
Serilla, it's like whole chapters. And it's a lot.
Yeah, I think that her point of view is very similar to Regal. And if we got more of Regal, like they would have been almost the same. Just not like with like Serilla doesn't have or ever could, I think, have like Regal's level of like
Delusion?
horrible, terrible person,
Oh,
like
yeah, he like he
torture
wanted
rings
to
and
torture
stuff.
people. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think that she would ever be like that, but the way that they think about the world around them and how like it's always everyone against them, like that is
Yes.
very much both of them. Like that's definitely
Yep.
their thinking.
really good
But
comparison.
Cirilla has slightly more of a reason. Regal
Yeah,
has like
oh,
no
definitely.
reason to think that way.
He,
Regal's only reason of thinking that way is because his mom told him so.
Right.
his mom told, like, I think it's definitely hard to like Regal could have, but I think that like his whole like childhood, his mother has been like whispering in his ear, being like, "You have to. Everyone hates you. You're alone. I'm your only one who cares about you. You've got to secure your place in the future of this kingdom." I don't have sympathy for Regal, but I can get it a little bit. Now, obviously I don't get the bloodthirstiness. That's entirely his own dealio. He chose to be a bloodthirsty asshole. But yeah, I can get the paranoia. Um, my last note in this chapter is basically just like Ronica's whole speech to Cirilla about trauma and growing from it, where she's like, as the challenge companion, to take what has happened to you and learn from it instead of being trapped by it. Nothing is quite so destructive as pity, especially self-pity. No event in life is so terrible that one cannot rise above it. This terrible event, whatever it was, is over and done. Cling to it and let it shape you, and you are doomed to live it forever. You're granting it power over you. Set it aside and shape your future as you wish it to be in spite of what happened to you. Then you have seized control of it. And it's like, that's it. That's the series. That's the theme. Thanks for watching.
Mm-hmm.
Like, all of that applies like beat for beat to Fitz as well.
Yeah.
I think that it is a little bit frustrating that Ronica says that because she really doesn't know all that Cirilla went through. And I feel like Cirilla is too much, like, she's still too close to her trauma and like everything that happened on the ship to be able to move past it right now. Like, she's probably like, she's like a month out from all of that at the most. So, like, I feel like Ronica's advice is great in the long haul, like after you've been able to process and be like, yes, like this horrible thing happened to me, but I'm not gonna let it like ruin my life any longer. But I feel like Cirilla hasn't even gotten to the point where she's allowing herself to admit that this horrible thing happened to her. She is still in like the denial stage, so she can't move past her trauma and like she can't be like, yes, this happened, but I'm gonna be a stronger person because of it. She's like, no, nothing happened. I'm fine. Like I have to just gather some protection around me, but like I'm fine deep down. Like I'm okay.
Yeah,
I agree.
dumb of Ronica. Like maybe not dumb, but like it's the classic
I think
Ronica thing of
Veronica
like
doesn't know.
not quite knowing when or what to say. Yeah.
Mhm.
It's a little tone deaf. Because
Well, I
it's
think that she doesn't know the extent of what happened. Like I don't think anybody, like Cirilla hasn't let anybody know what happened to her. So I
no.
feel like Veronica thinks that what happened is in the far past, and that's why she's like thinks that it's okay to tell her this, or she doesn't think it was like to the extent that it
And
happened.
it was, right.
But
I know Ronica says
because
something about
Will is
like
so quiet
someone
about
had
it, she
like
doesn't know.
Ronica like identifies it as like someone had broken this woman thoroughly and completely or something. So I think that like
Yeah.
I don't know. I think I agree with like the time comment. It could be that she thinks that it's long ago or longer ago than it was, but I feel like Veronica's like if not the exact like act gets the vibe of what happened.
Yeah. She definitely should have or could have said it nicer and in a more like sympathizing way than just like the very Bingtown trader way of like, shit happens, like let's move on.
Right.
But I think that that's like how Ronica approaches her whole life because like even after Ephraim dies, she's like, we still have to maintain like all of this stuff. Like we have to do all of our life. We can't just like quit living because like my husband and like my reason for living has died.
Right. She just keeps on keeping on.
She really does.
It's definitely the thing with all of like the Vestrit women is that they're really stubborn, but that part of that is also they have like the power to be super resilient and like have a good sense of themselves.
Yeah.
I guess that is just gonna be my last note for the chapter. Just like I feel like it's really hard to like write families in a way where like you can see the through lines, but they're still clearly their own people. And I think that Monica, or not Monica, what am I saying? Robin Hobb succeeds with that in the series on like multiple levels with like Fitz's complicated, like the whole Farseer line family tree, and here with the Vestrits and all. Even with like some of the minor character families, like you see with Brashen's family, yeah.
I agree.
And they feel like a family. Like when Althea and Ronica are fighting and stuff, Ronica like still thinks in her mind, she's like, yeah, like I would take Althea back in a heartbeat if she came back to the house. Like there's nothing that would like make me send her away because she's my daughter. And like that's a very family way of thinking, I think. Even if it's like a found family, it doesn't have to be like blood family.
Right.
But like that just feels very family-esque.
Do we have any other notes for this chapter?
I do not.
Let's move on to chapter 7, Dragon Ship. Bolt's here. That's the chapter.
Thank you and good night.
That's our show. Yeah, so Wintro and Bolt basically have got like a Wintrow's like, no, you can't show yourself because that would kill Vivacia. And Bolt's like, I don't give a shit. Like honestly, like it's cool that you love your life ship, but she's fake and I'm not. And also even if she was real, I would care more about myself. So fuck your life ship.
Yeah. I know that Bolt is scary and bad, but like she's got points. She makes points.
She is the product of effectively a genocide of her entire race, and she's been a slave for her entire lifetime. So like,
I also would be very angry and mean and terrible if that happened to me. So I can't blame her at all.
Especially because the people that she now is like serving are the reason that she's like this in the first place. Like,
yep.
She's got it bad. It's not like she can run away from the people who did this to her. She's like reliant on them.
Right.
Also, the scene of Vivacia like dying is scary. Like, I'm sure that was terrifying on my first read when she like became all gray and stuff. Like, holy shit.
Yeah.
They really make us feel for what is effectively like it's because like I feel like with people dying, there's so many ways to make it like grotesque or scary, but like they really make us feel for a piece of wood.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
My only note for this chapter was, Bolt is here. But then when I was thinking back about it, I I like that she comes through from a story that Kennett's telling. Like, Kennett just starts telling this random story that, like, his mom told him when he was little. And it turns out to be, like, a real story from way back in the Elderling days. And it shows, like, how old Bolt is and how far back her knowledge goes, but also shows, like, how much of a bitch she is. Because she's just, like, so mean to him when he gets one detail wrong. She's like, that's not her name. You're a fucking moron. And, like, but also it's interesting that she even knows that person because that was either a person or an elderling, but, like, they look so far down on everybody that's not dragons a lot of the time that it's like, oh, you actually remember that, like, mortal well enough to correct somebody on their name.
Well, I think that people were so different when dragons were thriving, like at the peak of dragon world. They, like, acted so differently towards the dragons. Like, the people were different. So, like, the dragons, like, I think they viewed him as, like, little pets. And they're like, oh, you're, like, cute and you, like, are nice and you give me gifts. So, like, I'll keep you. And I think that that's kind of the way they viewed humans. And then with Elderlings, I think it was a little bit more of, like, a partnership. From the way that, like, Tintaglia thinks about it sometimes. It feels like they weren't full equals, but the Elderlings were closer to, like, the level of dragons than humans were.
Right.
It also kind of sounds like both humans and dragons needed, or, like, I guess humans / elderlings and dragons needed each other to keep each other's egos in check, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Where it's like with humans, it's like just there's these big intelligent creatures who can and will both, like, beat you in, like, intelligence and also can just eat you. For dragons, it's sort of like it doesn't matter that we're smaller than you. We us humans / elderlings can still do things that you can never dream of, or can, like, keep up with you in terms of creativity and intelligence. So.
Well, and they have little hands, so, like, when stuff gets lodged in the scales of the dragons, like, they need people to get it out. Like, you literally need us.
That happens a lot in Rain Wilds.
I think it only happens so much for them because they're walking all the time.
Walk, yeah.
Like, I think that if they were flying, it would happen just occasionally. Like, when Tintaglia gets struck by that arrow, like, that was the first time that anything like that happened to her.
Right.
In, like, her wing, and she, like, needed help getting it out and stuff like that. It was her, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, she's the one who gets shot, and she gets, like, poison?
And she's, like,
it's, like,
she's borderline dying.
Yeah.
Oh, right, because they have to, like, to Kelsingra.
Yeah.
Oh, like, she flies to Kelsingra, and then, like, the Elderlings have to come. So there's something where they have to help her. I'm gonna say. I also think it happens because, like, in the Rainwalds, they're like the dragons are still growing up, so they probably, like, do they, like, shed their scales or something as they mature? I don't know. I might have got that from somewhere else, but it sounds like a dragon thing to do.
I don't remember that, but also there's a lot of details I don't remember, so it could be.
I was thinking about this because we learn a lot about how, like, the cocoons are made and how the dragons form and stuff like that in this section, either in this chapter from Bolt or in, I think, the next one from Tintaglia. Like, I think we get a little snippets of both, and it seems like it's a mixture of, like, the memory stone is ground into sand, and it's the sand from those beaches mixed with the, like, saliva of the dragons who are helping to, like, make the cocoon for the serpents that makes
memories.
All the memories. Yeah. And I was going somewhere with this, but now I don't remember where it was.
Well, it makes sense.
It had a point, but it's fizzled. I'll get it back eventually. Oh, I remember now. I think that I think maybe part of the reason why the serpents and the dragons that came from everything in the Rainwilds are so, like, little and, like, malnourished and stuff like that is because the beach that they usually would have cocooned on that has the memory sand isn't the one that they went on, in addition to only having Tintaglia to help them all weave their cocoons. Like, I think it was a mix of her being the only dragon and them not having, like, the memory sand that really screwed them up. In addition to, like, it was poor timing and they were super late to cocoon and all of that stuff.
Do you think that they get, like, there's, like, some memory sand, because they still have, like, wizard wood style cocoons, but I think it's probably, like, diluted or something.
Yeah.
It's been, like, centuries, and, like, we were told that, like, the entire Rainwild's place has been, like, crazy terraformed or whatever.
I think the timing thing ends up having, like, the heaviest effect, because a lot of them aren't, like,
fully cooked.
Forming. Yeah.
Yeah.
Half cooked.
Yeah. They're still raw in the middle. They need a little thermometer.
Just, like, imagining one of those, like, you'd see in doctor's offices with, like, the person with a thermometer in their mouth and, like, a hot pack on their head, but it's a dinosaur, but it's a dragon.
Yeah. I was thinking more meat thermometer, but that works too. Instead of, like, pork and beef and all that stuff, you have, like, dragon on your meat thermometer as well to see if it's finished.
It's really interesting that we get lots of this chapter from Edda's point of view, because I think that, like, having some distance from Wintro and Kenneth's reactions to it as the people who are closest to Vivacia is, I think, a neat way to, like, give us, like, sort of a holistic perspective on what's going on, rather than having us be in Kenneth's or Wintro's head and having them go, oh fuck, oh shit, oh fuck.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it shows how extreme the change is, because Edda hasn't been paying that much attention to Vivacia, because they have this weird, like, rivalry going on for Kenneth. So if it's so much of a change that, like, it's very obvious to Edda, then we realize, like, that shit's really bad. Whereas if we were in Wintro's head, like, it'd be more obvious.
Mm-hmm.
I also love how, like, she's, like, so perceptive with regards to Kenneth, more so than I think literally anyone else in the series, and I love it. She's like,
yep,
pissed off about Vivacia dying. He's like, his anger is too great. There's something else here, something even deeper and more painful than Vivacia's loss. And we sort of, like, get a hint of what that is later on, where, like Kenneth is like, this is not the first life ship I've ever known. They do not die so easily. Like,
mm-hmm.
I wonder what that's all about.
Well, I feel like both Kenneth and Paragon are making, like, semi but not very subtle, like, comments about each other. Because in the very first chapter of this section, Paragon says, Kenneth, he said in a low and fateful voice, we go to face down the pirate and take from him all that is rightfully ours. And, like, Althea just thinks that he's talking about Vivacia and he's, like, jumped on board with this and feels so passionate about it, but, like, he's trying to take back, like, I don't know, his sense of self from Kenneth, because I feel like Kenneth poured so much of himself into Paragon that Paragon can't separate that, and he needs to, like, I was thinking he needs to give that back in order to gain his individuality.
And also he loves Kenneth, and he loves Kenneth, right? And I think that Paragon just has like such a awful relationship with the idea of love, and I think he's sort of like, I don't even think Paragon knows what he wanted to do when he got Kenneth. He just knows that he wants to be close to him again.
Yeah.
Yep.
There's like in the last chapter when like the guy they captured is like, yeah, Kenneth's in love with Vivacia now, by the way. And Paragon freaks the fuck out. He's like, Kenneth would never.
Yep.
Yeah. I feel so bad for Paragon then, because you know that he's upset because, like, that should have been him, and he couldn't, like, be what Kenneth needed him to be, so he got, like, thrown out and replaced.
Yeah. It's rough for lots of people in this series, but, like, Paragon has it. I think for doing a top 3, I think Paragon would be in there somewhere. He's got it really
I feel
bad.
like Paragon would be top 1, because he got, like, mutilated, he got so many people died on his ship, and then he got, like, isolated. He got put into, like, solitary confinement for years and years and years, went crazy, and then was forced to go back to sea to confront the guy who did all that stuff to him in the first place.
And he has all of baby Kenneth's, like, trauma memories.
And 2 dragons warring inside himself. Like, Paragon cannot
also,
win.
like, hundreds of, like, random pirates who died on him. Because we see at the end, right, he's, like, talking about how there's all these little races warring within him.
Yeah.
Yep. That reminded me of, spoiler alert to anyone who hasn't watched Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, but it reminded me of the Philosopher's Stones in that story. When Kenneth was talking about, like, all the different things, like, inside him and all the different people and personalities and stuff.
Wizardwood is basically a Philosopher's Stone.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
I guess also on that same note, or similar note, the line where Wintrow sort of like grappling with what Vivacia is, and he's saying that I doubt she was ever truly alive in the sense that you and I are. And one, I thought that was kind of interesting because I feel like this sort of like what is a life or what is sapience is sort of like a theme that is usually covered in science fiction, and it's interesting to see it like in a fantasy context.
Mm-hmm.
And the second is, I disagree with Wintrow, obviously. I think that like Vivacia can still be her own person despite what her origins were, because she like synthesized and processed and like had all these things that weren't just like what do you call it, like regurgitating stuff from her past lives. It was a synthesis. So yeah.
Yeah. She's making her own thoughts and drawing her own conclusions. It's not just quoting stuff that she has had in like put inside her.
Mm-hmm.
And she has her own personality. Like, she's got traits similar to Vestrit's, but like she doesn't always make the same decisions that Althea would make.
Yeah.
Or, you know, she's unique.
She's not the same as like Ephraim just because he went in her. She's not like him.
I think it's just sort of like Bolt-induced despair, because Bolt sort of like
definitely
the idea of what she is and like bring it up to 100 for her own purposes.
Yep.
Did we talk about in the past like the reason that live ships need like 3 generations of humans to like quicken?
I don't think so.
I don't remember if we did.
Because I feel like we might have, but it's been so long, so I'm just going to say it again. If we have, but if we haven't, then this is going to be new information for you guys.
Yeah,
I was thinking...
We never, ever talk about things that we've already talked about on this podcast. Never.
No, it's always brand new content, never rehashing. I was thinking as I was reading that the live ships need 3 generations of humans at least, or like 3 people to quicken, because that is like the lowest amount of like memory and experiences and like physical flesh that a dragon would have had inside of the cocoon. So like the three people combined make up for what was lost when the dragon's body was cut out of the like wizard wood cocoon. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Could be. I don't think we ever get like a firm explanation for why it's 3.
I think Robin Hobb just likes 3s because she said that like everything feels good. That's why she makes so many trilogies, because like 3 is just a magic number.
She even made 3 trilogies for Fitz.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Actually, I have a question, which this is more like I don't know the answer to it, but like, why didn't Bolt come out as soon as Vivacia died? Like, what is she taking her sweet time about that she only shows up later on in the chapter?
Maybe she's just trying to figure out how to take control of the figurehead. Like, maybe she doesn't understand how to animate it.
Didn't also, like, I thought that when Vivacia comes back, she talks about how she, like, regretted going so deep and that, like, Bolt kept her down. So, like, I was thinking it was, like, kind of a power struggle that she, like, Bolt had to
suppress
Vivacia in order to come out, and it took a little bit of time because I feel like both of them are powerful beings at that point. Like, Vivacia has quickened and she's like becoming her own person, and she's got all of these generations of people in her. Mm-hmm. Compared to like Bolt, who's a dragon, but like they kind of are like equal matches, and then Bolt just kind of wins out.
That makes sense to me.
I guess it's sort of like Vivacia wanted to like die / not exist anymore, but that doesn't mean that she wanted Bolt to take her place. So she probably would have.
Yeah. Right.
That makes sense.
Put up a fight.
My last sort of stuff for this chapter is the charm is still being cryptic as shit, and I don't get it. The charm is like, trust me, have I ever steered you wrong? And it's talking about like some shit about the dragon. It's like, do you conceal the dragon, or does the dragon conceal you? And I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about, dude? Like, give me a straight answer for once. We're in the final book of the trilogy, and I still don't get what your point is.
Same.
Yeah,
I feel dumb because I'm reading this for the second time, and I feel like this should be the time where I'm like, oh, I'm putting together the pieces, but like I simply am not.
Yeah, the charm is something that I think is just going to be confusing to us, at least on this read. Maybe we'll like gain some new wisdom on the next read, but
if we don't gain wisdom in this read, I'm posting it on the subreddit and seeing if anyone has any wisdom about it, because I'm like,
yeah, that's a good idea.
Surely.
We have no idea.
Right.
Yeah, do we have any other thoughts?
Not for this chapter, no.
Okay. So, moving on to chapter 8, Lords of the Three Realms. And this is, we got 2 points of view here. We have Tintaglia, who is sort of like trying to see if any of her other kin have survived. Going back to various Elderling cities. And then we have Malta, who, having been swept downriver of Treehog, is sort of like, well, I think we're gonna die, gang. But then they get picked up by a Chalcedian ship, and Malta is like, well, I'm not out of the woods yet, but we're slightly safer, and I have to figure out a new mode of surviving on this very treacherous space.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's so interesting that most chapters like are those two together. Like it's Tintaglia. It's like a chapter with Tintaglia and Malta together. Because I think that happened a lot either in the last book or in the beginning of this book, where it was those two points of view together in the one chapter, and then it was like other chapters with other people. And I like that they're like being lumped together still.
It's what, like, when Taglia was trying to, like, get Malta to free her, she's like, we're both queens.
Mm-hmm.
It's just...
Yep.
But there are, like, lots of parallels where, like, Malta is, like, incredibly, like, thirsty. Tintaglia is super hungry. There's a part where, like, Tintaglia is, like, longing to, like, drink the silver or something, and Malta's, like, super thirsty. So there's like, a through line of both of their, like, desperations.
Yeah. Speaking of drinking the water, this just, like, the whole description of it sounds really miserable. And, like, honestly, if I were on that boat and there was basically no hope for escaping, I'd probably just drink the water too. So I don't blame Coochie for doing it.
I just think she's stupid, and I wish that she would have lived instead of the satrap, but, like, I get that they kind of need him to survive when they're on the Chalcedonian ships, but would have been nice. At least him bathing in the water is, like, a little bit of petty revenge.
Oh, he's so gross. Like, when he's trying to say that everything that happened was Malta's fault for not, like, sleeping with him at the ball. Like, the logic was so convoluted and ridiculous. And
it's so disgusting.
Like, yeah, you think that, like, someone denying you could be a catalyst to all of this bad stuff. Like, that's just, ugh. He's so gross.
Well, and there's being like, I hope you die first so I can watch. Like,
yep.
Yeah.
I wish.
I think that, like, Malta has, like, had a long history with being, with, like, cutting with words, so I'm really glad that she's getting to use it use it on a subject who I do not mind being taken down a peg or two.
Where we very much approve of her using it.
But what's annoying is that it doesn't take him down a peg or two. Like, it doesn't work. It's so frustrating, because I remember when on my first read, I was like, yes, Malta's gonna, like, whip this bitch into shape with her sassiness, and it just, like, goes over his head completely.
He's too obtuse.
Like, ugh.
Actually,
I hate him so much.
He's the fucking worst.
At least every other person we know that they die. Satrap is just
yeah.
I'm not looking forward to reading about Hest, but whenever I feel angry at Hest, I know that I can think about, okay, he gets eaten by a dragon.
And I can't wait for that.
It is very satisfying. I think that we could just insert the satrap in that situation as well, and just imagine that he got eaten by them too. Because I feel like, honestly, the satrap would go to Kelsingra in the future and be like, I own this. I own all the dragons. Like, you're my property. And he would get eaten. So, like, that's not something that's far-fetched.
Or even later, like, if he didn't make it up the river, he would definitely, like, send ships to Chalced and be like, you have been buddies for so long. I guess you have new management, but I'm still better than you. So, like, let's work together. Like, the new management would not take kindly to that.
No, and Selden's part of that, so he'd be like, yeah, fuck that.
Yeah. I know Chalced is a priority because it's way worse than Jamila, which is crazy, but, like, afterwards, like, you've sacked one city. The dragons go to another city and take it over as a treat?
Yeah. Going back to Kelsingra, I completely forgot that Tintaglia had a little temper tantrum and is the reason that the well is broken when the Rainwilders come to it. I, like, completely forgot about that.
What does she do?
She breaks, so she like goes to the well to try and drink the silver and can only see like a little speck, and she's like, I don't even know if that's like actually silver or if it's just like the stars reflected in this like well. And she gets pissed and she like breaks part of it off and shoves it into the well, and she's like done with it. She's like, fine, I can't drink it, no one can. And then in Rainwilders they have to like go and fix it, and I think like people have to go down in there with like harnesses and stuff to pull it out because of Tintaglia.
I completely missed that Tintaglia had that temper tantrum. That's so funny. She almost causes the dragons she almost causes the destruction of her own species later on, as it just
because of a temper tantrum she had.
That's such a human/dragon thing.
For sure. I thought it was so funny. I'm like, wow. All right, Tintaglia.
It's funny because I felt really sympathetic towards Tintaglia in this chapter. She's like, sweet as vengeance could have been, it could not save those of her kind who might still have survived. Her first duty was to them, and she has like the dragons, especially the ones we see in Rainwilds, are kind of selfish dicks, and it's interesting that like we see with Tintaglia, like she has priorities. She has like care for people. She has care for people. She's still arrogant. I don't think dragons can even help that, but like she's a lot more like reasonable than lots of the dragons we see in the series.
I think that's because like she's like an actual dragon. I feel like she's like a level 1 dragon, and the other ones are kind of like a lower tier, because like I just don't see them as real dragons. I feel like the next generation of dragons will be real dragons, but these ones are like kind of fake just because they're just like not real dragons in my mind. I just don't view... They're not on the same level as Tintaglia. They're, like, fake, and she's, like, real. She actually has, like, real memories, and she had everything happen at the right time for her. So, like...
Right time. She was several centuries too late. She was overcooked.
She was overcooked. Yeah.
Maybe that's why she's, like, actually a good dragon.
I think the others are dragons, too, but I think that, like,
I just think their personalities, all of them are so stuck up for no reason. And like Tintaglia, who should be the most stuck up, like can actually be reasoned with, unlike the other ones.
Mercor
also like they don't have the sense of perspective that Tintaglia does, right? Like Tintaglia is very aware of the state of one of the last of her species, and it's something that like the other dragons like think about, but Tintaglia, like everything that Tintaglia does is like motivated by that. The other dragons are just sort of like, I'm cold. My skin itches. Are we there yet? Like they're literal kids. Meanwhile, Tintaglia's been like maturing in that cocoon for several hundred years. Yeah.
I guess that's true. Maybe they'll become real dragons when they get older.
They'll grow up.
Yeah.
I don't know if Centaura will ever grow up, but the rest maybe. There's hope.
She's the worst. She's so freaking annoying.
She is really annoying.
I don't think there's anything redeeming about her. And like, shouldn't there be?
just the earnestness of like,
shouldn't there be?
Has to be, right?
We see stuff from her point of view. I feel like she should be a better person than that, a better dragon than that. And she's not, and it's disappointing.
Not nice.
Maybe we'll warm up to her on a reread. We'll see.
She's like...
You never know.
She's like lightheartedly not nice though, whereas like a lot of the other like actual villains in the story are just like hateful not nice. Like Centaura's at least not hateful not nice.
She's
I feel like
petty and irritated at times. Like she hates, well, what's her carer's name? I forget.
Wing lady. It starts with a T.
Clawfoot.
Thymara.
Yeah.
Oh, Thymara. Yeah.
When you said it starts with a T, I remembered.
Yep.
Yeah, she's kind of a dick to Thymara, but I think she's all right to everyone else.
That's because no one else has to work so closely with her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I always felt bad for Thymara. She's like, why is my dragon so mean to me?
Yeah.
She really pulled a short
then
stick.
she sprouts fucking wings because her dragon's like, yeah, I want you to look exactly like me, so I'm gonna make you a real dragon.
Yep.
And then gets pissed when she actually uses them to fly. Like, what?
She's like, wait, hold on. I was supposed to
That's
fly.
just for decoration. Those aren't for real use.
Just for decoration.
Like, you can't tell me how to use my wings. This is the first time that we've, I think, talked mostly about Rainwilds and not one of the Fitz books going off track.
Yeah, progress.
Yeah. We're really growing and evolving, like Ronica, except better than Ronica.
We're all better than Ronica.
Yeah. Yes.
I think talking about Kelsingra and all of like the Elderling settings is such like a Rainwilds thing, so that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
Speaking of, you really feel for Tintaglia when she's talking about like the Elderling cities and stuff, because she's like, the road still recalled itself as a highway, but no one else in the world did. I think, okay, first of all, that line goes hard, and second of all, it's like the idea of like forcing an object to retain its identity is like such a, it's like, it feels like a concept that's like so like one step shifted from normal, that is like you can almost get it in that way, and you don't need further explanation. It's like, I wonder if you could like make Memory Stone into beings on its own, like live ships. Like not even if you carve a dragon, could you like first like, hey Bridge, you're now named Bridge, and like with sufficient like magic skill and blood or whatever, could you just make Bridge into Bridge? Bridge with a capital B.
I wonder if that's probably what they did. Like they would carve it, but they would also like, it's like when they're carving the dragon, like Fitz talks about how Verity like carves a little bit and then like runs his hand over it and then it like turns into better scales. Yeah.
But he puts his memories into it and sort of like his personality. I'm wondering if like independent of that, could you make an object that like has its own personality in the way that live ships do? I guess if you combine a sufficient enough of number of people, maybe, I guess.
That's what I was thinking after a while, because of how much like of little bits of like slices of life the Memory Stone kind of absorbs just from the people walking on the street and stuff like that. If you could change it a little bit when carving it and be like, take this and like have it be part of you, then you could maybe make a being. But I think that it would take a lot of time if you're not putting yourself into it.
I think you have to put yourself into it.
So you have to like be a sacrifice.
If you try not to, you end up like Girl on a Dragon.
But how did the Elderlings... So the Elderlings can do the Memory Stone because they're just making it a road, and they're not saying like, you are capital R road.
Because the, was it Tintaglia, I think, remembers this, like, that the Elderlings, when they knew they were gonna die, would go, like, carve a dragon and then, like, die into it.
The dragons, yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's
they had to, like, give themselves...
That was, like, the Elderling way of saying, like, go fuck yourself. Oh, go carve a dragon.
Oh my god, yeah, that could be.
Yeah, I guess my last note is just like another Tintaglia line where it's like the Elderling cities would ultimately be swallowed by the wide world, and then no one would remember a time when man and dragon had dwelt together. It surprised Tintaglia that such a thought could cut her heart. She cares. She cares about humans and history and all of that. That's what makes Tintaglia compelling. Yeah, she's an asshole,
a whole like
but she
race
cares.
on their own that got wiped out because of this. No wonder she's kind of sad about it. Because she's on her way next. Like, it's the Elderlings first, and then the dragons are heading out too. Yeah. Something I was thinking about with like Tree Hog is like I wonder if instead of it being like people being around all of the elderling material and like the city of like Frengong, the elderling city that's like by Treehog, and that is what causes their like growths and stuff. I was thinking it's probably actually like them living so close to dragons and like dragon cocoons without the dragons forming them intentionally that causes all of these growths and stuff. And that maybe because Tintaglia was the last dragon and the last cocoon, and now that she's gone, like maybe people will stop having such severe growths as they age living in the Rain Wilds.
It makes a lot of sense. And that's I don't think that's something that's addressed in the books because no one ever thinks of it, but that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And I think also the reason that Rain has the least amount of growths and deformities and stuff like that is because he has spent so much time literally like conversing with Tintaglia and being around her, and she like unintentionally or just her presence and like their connection shaped the way that he was changing.
Sure. Okay, do we have any other notes for this chapter?
I don't think so.
Okie dokie. So the last chapter of this section is chapter 9, Battle.
Oh. I have to go. So.
Okay, sure, we can leave this one to the next one.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that was chapter 8 was the last chapter for the section. We'll get to chapter 9, Battle, next time. Thanks everyone for watching, and see you all next time. Bye.
Do we want to read 2